All right, 6:09 on the 27th of March, 2024. I call this meeting of the Capital Planning Committee to order. Let's begin with the roll call vote. Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, aye.
Chris, aye.
All right, announcements. This meeting is being recorded. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify the chair at this time. This committee still has a vacancy for a Kingston resident. If you or anyone else that you know may be interested, please reach out to the Kingston's Finance Committee. You may reach them by email at fincom@kingstonma.gov. That's FINCOM@kingstonma.gov. Anyone else have any announcements? Hearing none, capital improvement plan updates. Any last minute updates, Keith?
No, the information that you guys received at your last meeting, with the, examples or the estimated costs and impacts to free cash. The numbers on the capital plan haven't changed. I've had conversations now as late as this afternoon with the school department. They do not believe there's any need to use, free cash to supplement the fiscal 24 school budget. But I will tell you, there was a conversation I had today with a Kingston school committee member who had indicated that one of the other regional communities, is going to use some free cash to reduce the impact of the increase in the school budget. I explained the school committee member that, typically using a one-time revenue for what seems to be an ongoing expense is not the best use of or best finance practice, but she agrees with. He's going to be continuing to work with the Kingston School Department to bring a budget proposal forward next Tuesday night at a Kingston School Department school committee meeting. They'll discuss that. My suggestion to him was to ask the finance committee chair to have the opportunity to meet on Wednesday evening with the finance committee to let them know where things stand and potentially get some guidance or feedback from the finance committee, and then either go back and make some additional cuts or potentially be the FinCom will be comfortable with wherever they end up after their meeting Tuesday night. So I explained to him that my 2 cents, and I don't get to vote, my 2 cents would be, I'd be concerned about using free cash this year because you're just kicking the can down the road. And he was going to try to identify if there was any unusual or one-time expenses that you could justify using some amount of money of free cash to offset. But like I said, they're going to be meeting next Tuesday evening, and from what I understand, the school committee will be debating some significant cuts to the Kingston School Committee budget. And at this point, they're unsure, or he was unsure, how much the Kingston School Committee would approve and support for cuts. So as we sit here tonight, it's good news that the Kingston schools don't think they need any, confident they don't need any fiscal 24 supplemental budget money from free cash. And I don't know where the FinCom or the Board of Selectmen are going to stand with potentially using free cash to try to balance the budget or reduce the impact with the school. So that's where we're at as we sit here tonight. I will say, just to lastly, I guess, some of the budget numbers are continuing to move a little bit. So on the sheet that I gave the Capital Planning Committee a couple of weeks ago, where the example was used to buy all 4 vehicles. And I don't have it in front of me. Carol, I apologize. You emailed it to me and I forgot to print it out. I had at the bottom of the 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, $1.233 million.
Which packet was that?
It was the packet that shows it had the funding scenario with all 4 trucks being purchased.
Funding all for streets and parks.
At the bottom of the page, there was a free cash balance after all of the anticipated free cash warrant articles were. Look at you. All the anticipated.
Why don't you sit down?
Okay. We anticipated 1.233 million after the use of free cash for all the different uses, including the 4 trucks. That has continued to have been massaged as we work our way through things. That number is between 1 million and 1.1 million now, I think, Carol.
Yeah, it's closer to 1.
Okay. So still, it's, you know, I think the goal has been at least $1 million. That's what those 4 trucks would do. I spoke, Keith, I spoke to you. You had asked me to see if we could put together some comparative examples of the purchase of a vehicle versus the lease of a vehicle versus deferring the vehicles. And Paul's in the process now of talking to the vendors we used on both the 1-ton trucks and the 10-wheel trucks. What Paul is trying to gather is what those trucks have been selling for the last couple of years. We know what they're going to sell for in fiscal 25. We know in fiscal 26, there'll be between a $5,000 and a $20,000 increase in cost solely because of, correct me if I'm wrong, emissions.
Correct.
We don't know at this point, Paul's trying to find out from our vendor, whether or not there'll also be an additional increase just for the vehicle itself.
As well as the, I think you mentioned that we don't know if the new engines will be compatible with the older engines.
So I assume we'll have that information for the capital planning committee sometime in the next week or so. What I'm trying to do is provide is accurate information if we can. We should know what most of the years
Are
we're.
you suggesting we would either hold our vote on the trucks or vote them and potentially come back to reconsider if something changes?
So my 2 cents is the least expensive approach to addressing the needs of streets, trees, and parks is to buy these vehicles cash and include them in the fiscal 25 capital planning article. That we know those costs are going to go up. We know there's between 6 months and a year delay. We know that leasing those vehicles is an alternative, but a more expensive alternative because we're paying interest.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, I think the most expensive approach is
Buy one for you.
is deferring some of these because we're then going to get hit with between $5,000 and $20,000 a truck, even if the cost of everything else of the truck remains the same,
Plus inflation.
plus inflation. So
And the
while
wait time on the trucks, which means operations not stall, but percentage of it slows down. There's one less truck, it's one less plow.
right, so you know, and the trucks that we're looking to acquire, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, are the bigger trucks. So if a 1-ton goes down, and there is a 1-ton we're looking to acquire, that's not as critical to a you know, a winter storm as one of the larger ones are. So
Not to mention, if you lost a 1-ton in the summer, you could send a 10-wheeler out its place for a lot of it would just be a bit of overkill, but you wouldn't be without a vehicle to bring aggregate or whatever, or carry refuse away, whatever they're doing, right?
Right, what we did is when facilities got their F-350, we included a sander on that. When we replaced the F-350, the highway department, we bought a sander for that. So if a 1-ton went down, I have pickup trucks that could take that slot, or that slot up, we can take that slot up. With the big trucks, once they go down, there are no more out there to be had. I'm trying to work with we had a plowing contractor 2 years ago that had one large sander and he was gonna get another one. He didn't come to work with us last year because the insurance rates were increased. Being down one sander now with a big truck, Keith and I have to discuss whether or not we're gonna spend the 15 or 20,000 to get that truck fixed, so I have it for next winter. Because if we decide, I get the go ahead from this committee, town meeting, and I tell our vendors in July, in May, that I got funding for it, I can get one of the large trucks hopefully by the summer of 25. Get one of the other large trucks hopefully by the fall of 25. And I won't see the third truck until at least the spring of 26. So that means I gotta get through at least another winter, almost a winter and a half with the current fleet that we currently have.
So, I guess my recommendation would be that even though, if all of the articles pass as presented in the draft warrant today, and we get down to $1 million free cash, I really wouldn't want to go below $1 million. But I think there's a pretty strong argument to be had that the amount of money we'd be spending even a year or so from now would be significantly more than what we'd be spending if we were to present an article at town meeting to fund 4 trucks and pay cash for that. I think that the free cash is stable enough and sufficient enough to do that. The amount of money we're looking for is probably upwards of just over $1 million.
You think you will do everything else you'll have to work with that amount of money?
So Carol, again, I had $1.2 million in the sheet that we gave out a couple of weeks ago, just talked about. There's been, again, some modifying of articles and needs that would be funded, at least intentionally, by free cash. That will leave us with just over $1 million in free cash. So
How long does it take for free cash? Let's just say 200,000. How long would it be for you'd have another 200,000 free cash? You want to be 1.2 million.
so it
And
depends.
I know it has to be certified as free cash, right? After.
Well, you want to, I mean, it serves, you probably, Carol can jump in. I think if you're looking to, you want to have free cash certified, and frankly, Carol's been so good at doing this, we get ours done. We're one of the first ones in the state to do it. Free cash is a calculation that, let's just say for argument's sake, we got approval at town meeting to spend all the items that would be funded at least in part by free cash. That would bring us down, just for round numbers, $1 million. At the end of fiscal 24, revenues that were received in excess of estimated revenues, monies that were appropriated that weren't spent, those types of things roll back when they close out the year. Those roll to free cash and either add or subtract from free cash. There are other items that impact our free cash balance. Free cash is calculated based on the results of the recently closed past fiscal year. So, nothing's going to increase free cash by $200,000 until we get free cash certified 6 months from now. 6 to 7 months. That fair statement, Carol? Look at
It
this.
is, yep.
So, like I said, it's a significant ask, and I think that I know Paul and I both certainly recognize that, and I'm sure this committee is, deliberating on that as well. And it's never going to be a good time. But part of the problem is, at least in my humble opinion, we've been digging out from having had to defer capital items all across town. And, the fire department, I think, has got themselves pretty well caught up. The police department, because their expenses aren't significant, $130,000 to $150,000 a year. It's the streets, trees, and parks vehicles that you don't need them till you need them. And we've gotten to the point now where just the condition of those trucks are not as reliable as we'd like them to be if we need them in a situation
I mean, we
Where
know two
we're gonna
leases are
respond.
made by a company, who can't get, it's not a business and Paul can't get parts to place with.
So my recommendation, I guess, if you'd like me to make one, is I think the board you can deliberate and vote on. We've provided 4 options for you. If there's another one you'd like us to work on, I'm happy to do it. But I think, I don't want to speak for Mr. Bazza, but I think we speak in unison when we say we recommend the acquisition of all 4 vehicles using cash as the method of purchase. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Does anybody have any concerns about that or want to suggest alternatives or have questions? I mean, I'm not an expert on how much we should have in free cash, and the idea of acquiring 4 trucks at once would have been nice if every year we could have just replaced
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
And then, obviously even at a rate of 2, I'm not sure that's enough of a help. I hate the idea of kicking anything down the road because I'm looking at 26 doesn't look that bad on the chart there, but 27, 28 is a lot of other big expenses.
Mhm.
And they will probably be leased. So if we lease too many of these, they're taking up some of that commitment.
That's the challenge, right?
And I actually think we should probably maybe at the next meeting potentially have a discussion item on load balancing those couple of years, whether something should be front-ended or pushed off, just so we're not doing it all in those 2 years. If the trucks move now successfully, which is a ways off from now between here and the town meeting, one or more of them will be in the way of doing all that other stuff, potentially. We can stay with 1 truck per year, or if we lease all 4 or all or 3 of them, those expenses are gonna be there when we're trying to get a fire engine, a Vector truck, trackless machine, and so some generators and HVAC units coming up, and it's,
And if I could, one of in the buy 4, buy 3 and lease 1, buy 2 and lease 2, buy 1 and lease 3. In all the other 3 examples where you weren't purchasing all 4 vehicles in fiscal 25 in cash, if you were to get approval at town meeting to lease those vehicles, those other 3 vehicles, if you only purchased 1 or 2 for that matter, there was going to be a need to increase the amount of money that was appropriated out of free cash into the capital stabilization fund for 2 or 3 years at least, increasing that to either 150, I think, or $200,000 in some of the options, to just keep the balance in a capital stabilization fund from going that, being in the negative, not having enough. So I think this keeps the practice of funding the same amount of money from free cash into stabilization consistent, which I think is important. And like I said, you guys have heard me say this enough. I don't want to continue to repeat myself, but the fact that you're going to be looking at spending, and I don't have the numbers yet, but I'll get them for you shortly. What I would suggest is a pretty significant amount of money more if you defer, and a greater amount of money, you're probably leasing at 6 or 7%, not at the 1% and 2%, 3% like we were the last few years.
I mean, the other thing is we defer, we take another project, we kick that down.
Yeah.
We keep kicking down the road, the Station 2 parking lot repaved.
Mhm.
A couple of year or 2 ago, it was estimated to be 50,000. This year, if we moved it, it would have been 75. That's a 50% increase.
Mhm.
That goes up if we kick it, next year, if we kick it down another year and say, we'll see what happens, price goes up.
Right.
So there's other costs besides,
There is.
Right.
And so I think, again, while it's maybe a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow to appropriate or ask for an appropriation of $1 million in vehicles for one department, I think the town financially can absorb that, and eliminate or reduce certainly the challenge you'll have in future years trying to prioritize which items are funded and which items continue to be deferred. The deferral list, I believe,
in vehicles anyways, is dropping townwide. You know, like I said, the fire department, I think, is on schedule. The police department continues to be the only other big department we have is streets and parks. And if we can get them the 4 vehicles they need now, it digs them out of a pretty significant hole in having the type of reliable equipment they need if they ever need that equipment for some sort of emergency. So that's what attracts me, I guess, to looking to try to just buy all 4 vehicles at one time, get them out, get it out of the way, and have those funded by paying cash and just being able to check that box for the next probably 8 years on the 1-ton and 10 to 15 years anyways on the 10 wheels.
15 to 20 based on how much.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, because it's been a challenging budget year. It will continue to be that. You know, there are still capital needs that we have that are more infrastructure type needs than there are vehicles. But, you know, our priority this year, I think, instead of spending $500,000 on paving projects, is spending that $500,000 to go from 1 truck to 4 trucks. Because that's the need. I can't plow the roads that are lousy or if they're beautiful if I don't have a truck to do it with. And that's basically what we're looking at.
I mean, does anybody else have any concerns or comments?
Well, while I think it's a big ask, it's needed. You have the money,
It is neat.
might as well take care of it and not have it hit with the finance charges and everything else. And
Right.
the increase in cost.
Right.
It's a no brainer.
If you look at the numbers, all 4 trucks paid in cash is $1,110,976. Now, if this committee or the finance committee decide to split that up, you know, out of the 4 trucks, 2 are the same price. 1 truck is about $100,000 more than the 1-ton. So any combination that you guys decide to do, if you decided to purchase 3 and lease 1, would you lease the least expensive one? Or would you lease the most expensive one to offset the costs? So you have additional cash to go into free cash. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then the or versus the interest, how much
Right.
money that in debt.
And we'll run those numbers. Like I said, I apologize for not having them tonight. I just wanted to be able to bring something to you that wasn't, there were actual costs that we should be able to get rather than trying to put together some estimates and some assumptions. We have, with the exception of, you know, what's going to be, what the prices are going to be in fiscal 26. You know, we've got hard numbers that will show this committee, and the finance committee, and the board of selectmen, you know, what we're looking at, what we've looked at for price increases over the last 2 or 3 years, and they've been significant.
But one of the things that always concerns me, not that it's that big a concern, but you know, at the budget advisory committee meeting, we said Carl Pike said he thought it'd be around 1.2 million for capital. Carol said 1.5, which I thought was more accurate because capital lease is probably better configured in. We were around 1.5 before we considered expanding this request. But on the other hand, so we had a consensus agreement, if you will. On the other hand, the committee said, well, we want to be level services. And part of my concern with these trucks is if we don't place orders to them in time, we'll be at a point where we're not level services.
I think that's important, but I also think what's more important is Paul and I and this committee are aware that if one or more of these trucks is deferred, we know that there's going to be, what I would suggest is a significant increase in price. The town of Kingston has the financial capability with the free cash balance that we have to avoid having to pay upwards of, you know, again, I don't know, between $5,000 and $20,000 a truck. So between $20,000 and $80,000 more just for the exhaust requirements, let alone the additional cost of just a simple truck. So, you know, if I had to try to come up with a defense or an argument about why we're proposing to do this year. I would probably touch on the issue with, level service, but I think more importantly, we have the money to do something that's a little bit unique and a little bit, out of the ordinary. But I think there's a really good reason why we want to do that. That's
We're
to
financially
avoid,
responsible in the long run.
I think it is, and, we are. I know I've heard the finance committee in the past, and I respect what they had to say, and it's true. We don't, if we lease something, we're locking ourselves in for future years and not having as much flexibility. Doing this eliminates leasing and, encumbering, so to speak, monies in future years for lease payments. But again, I continue to come back to just the obvious amount of money we'll save because of the enhancements in the emissions that we just aren't going to be able to
Yeah,
avoid.
but one of the things I was saying earlier, though, it's not just money potentially saved on this. Because we're doing this now, when we're using our regular $1.5 million budget in the years to come, these items will keep kicking down the road, which they themselves grow in expense due to inflation, and everything going on in the economy. We can resolve them before they get those.
I mean, again, we're lucky we have a pretty significant savings account. I think what we're doing is taking an asset that we have available and we're utilizing it. And I know it's a little bit different than what we've done in the past, but last year we spent a bit more. This year we're spending, we were spending considerably more than $1.5 million. But again, we're doing it because I think it's financially prudent to do that. And I think it's going to be very easy to provide the numbers to the FinCom, the Board of Selectmen, and ultimately the voters, and wherever we end up, and we'll deal with that. But I think there's a good story to tell about using an asset that we have to fund a need before we see significant bumps in price. So,
Or a lack of services. My main concern about asking for these trucks is winter. And if I can't maintain the roads in the wintertime, that's gonna upset a lot of residents in this town and the other two towns that share Silver Lake. It's gonna require both the fire and the police departments on more calls because now the roads are slippery and people don't slow down, there'll be more accidents. I mean, the town, or the residents of this town have come to an understanding or expectation of what these roads are supposed to look like. So many, there's no, we're providing that for the last 20+ years.
and I guess the last thing I'll say, if I could, Mr. Chair, and I've got copies if anybody wants one, but last night, the Board of Selectmen meeting, the Board of Selectmen agreed to delay the annual town meeting from May 4th to May 11th. But one of the thoughts I had and what I proposed to the board last night was pushing back the closing of the warrant basically a month, from the 26th of March to the 23rd of April. So, again, if there's a need to revisit,
We have the time. to
you've
do it.
you've got nearly a month to do
So we could potentially vote any solution we want. And if we're concerned about going to town meeting with split votes between our committee, the finance committee, and the board of selectmen, we want to be a little bit more unified.
Yeah.
Just to make town meeting easier, we can reconsider.
Absolutely.
And then we can ask the finance committee if they, or whoever votes against whatever we bring forward to reconsider as well.
Exactly.
Because I'm not worried about town meeting, actually, I'm more worried about concerned with just reactions that happen upon first hearing something.
Sure.
I know when Paul came and said he wanted 4 trucks, Mike put it pretty well in that meeting, or the one following is felt like he was drinking water out of a fire hose. It takes a moment to wait, what?
Yeah.
We knew there was a problem, we just, you gotta think about all the different factors, sometimes like, oh yeah, maybe it makes sense to do something bold.
Well, initially my thought was the same as Mike's, I think. And after having some time to sit down and talk to Paul and discuss, why there was a need to bring something like that forward, it really has kind of come full circle to, honestly, we can leave the money in free cash and have it remain there for another year, which is always nice to do if you can, but we've got a need. And we have the capacity to address that need. And I think it'd be, I think we can tell a good story about what we're trying to do and why. And
I think that the financial argument is somewhere between cash and a hybrid. You know, just to put it all up on and sort of kick it all down the road doesn't. You know, those are the worst options.
Mhm.
Either we're gonna buy all four, or 2 or 3 with cash and then lease 1 or 2, or
it just, I mean, running the numbers through the capital stabilization accounts. Again, you're not only potentially using free cash and leasing, but then you're also asking to take more money out of free cash to transfer into the capital stabilization account to fund your leases. So, you know, there's a little bit of a blip in the radar with regards to how much money we're spending. But everything else in that thought process stays the same. We're keeping the funding, the stabilization account and the impact of free cash the same. It's not bouncing around. I know there'll be people, and I think it's a fair statement. Once you increase the amount coming from free cash and the capital stabilization, it may be difficult 3 or 4 years down the road to drop that back down. And that's a fair statement. It takes, you know, some financial discipline to do that. So, I'm not sure what else I
I guess we get the pulse of the committee.
Sure.
I think Wayne spoke, I've spoke. You have anything else, Wayne?
I was just curious, town contracts, they're good for the next couple of years, because usually that's where they look for. the
Union
funding.
contracts,
Union
so
contracts.
union contracts, we're in year 2 of the union contract now. So the union contracts expire June 30th, 25.
And any idea what the state aid's gonna be? Anybody talked numbers yet, or that's too early?
Well, I mean, I don't, so I have tentative numbers for state aid for fiscal 25. Those will change. And again, if Carol disagrees, she can tell me, but you know, they put out preliminary numbers for state aid. They may change 1 or 2%, but they're not going to drastically change. And if the revenues goes up, the charges they hit us with go up. So there really is a pretty immaterial amount of money. We'll get the same amount of money within 1% of what the state has given for preliminary numbers, because they know municipalities are using those numbers to budget.
Right.
And they wouldn't release those if they weren't comfortable with it. So, you know, we feel good with the state numbers. You know, some of them have gone up a bit, but the state's been challenged. You've probably read in the paper or seen on the news that, you know, the states had to cut back a little bit because, you know, there's some of their revenue estimates look like they may not come to fruition. So, but we're, you know, I'm confident that with the numbers we have in fiscal 20, not concerned about.
Mr. Michael, what do you think?
You said that you're comfortable that the schools are not looking to dip into free cash, right?
For fiscal 24, yes, sir.
Okay. What's your best sense of where things current? I know it's in flux and very much outside our control, but I agree with basically everything that's been said about, given interest rates, given the emissions issues, given inflation, that sort of in a vacuum, doing all 4 of these and doing all 4 of them with cash makes sense. Where I get concerned is just the competition for
Sure.
some of this money going forward, which is into fiscal 25.
And I think that's fair. And as I tried to indicate at the beginning of the meeting, my conversation with the superintendent of schools, the business administrator, one of the school committee members is they feel confident 24 is not going to be touched. 25, there's still, frankly, the impression I get, and I don't want to speak for the school department, but my impression is, you know, there have been some goals set for the Silver Lake School Committee and for the Kingston School Committee to reduce budgets by a fairly significant amount of money. I don't know, from what I understand, Silver Lake, I think, has done that. The Kingston School Department is, like I said, they're meeting next Tuesday night to try to deliberate about where the school committee thinks they can be with regards to the Kingston local budgets for the schools. I explained to the school committee member I spoke to that if free cash was proposed to be used, it impacts a lot of different things, right? And primarily it impacts our ability to fund our capital improvement plan. Some of which is school-related projects. So that was another reason why, in my conversation with him, I'm hesitant to use free cash. It gets us out of the school challenge to some degree, possibly, but it just creates another set of problems for this committee on what we can afford and what we can recommend and what has to then be deferred. So it might be a little bit clearer mid to end of next week after they've deliberated and met with the finance committee. I just think you guys need to recommend it. I would suggest, if you're comfortable, to recommend what you think is appropriate based on the information we have today. And if we have to come back and revisit, we will. But I think, unfortunately, we're having to continue to kick the can down the road because everybody's waiting for somebody else to make a decision. And they all are interrelated. There's no question about that. But I think people need to. Some of the committees who have decisions to make need to make those decisions and see where things fall in the big picture.
The only way that schools can cut budget is by cutting staff or programs. Is that what they're looking at doing?
So in my conversations today, there was talk about staff. There was talk about, open position, not filling open positions. There was talk about, they didn't get into any specifics, but they talked about, supplies and things of that nature, which I don't think so, is not a big, obviously the lion's share of the school budget is salaries and benefits, right? Just like a lot of it is for the town. And if you're gonna dig as deep as they may need to dig, it's gonna mean, changes to how they provide an education to the children in Kingston. And those are policy decisions they're gonna have to make. But I think there may be, staff reductions if the FinCom, the Board of Selectmen, and the school committee all agree that they need to get down to where they to the goal they were given. Put it that way.
They're not cutting $1 million in chalk and expo marker.
No.
Like that.
Nope, not happening.
Or maybe they won't paint some halls or something like that.
Well, so again, some of that stuff, we've got a small, as you guys are aware, we've got a small
Equipment.
project, article, and there's some painting and some door replacements and one or two other projects in that small equipment article for the school as well. So, all those types of things will have to be looked at if there's any changes to the use of free cash.
And if I could bring it up, Mr. Chairman, we're not discussing anything about future paving needs in this town. Brought up at the beginning of the meeting about the price to repave the parking lot on Station 2 going up 50%. Station 2 is a minor percentage of the amount of asphalt in the town that we have to oversee
On town property.
on town property. And as Keith stated earlier, my priority is the vehicles. That's why I've not asked for the additional $500,000 this year. But you're talking about kicking cans down the road? We have not addressed the lack of paving money that is gonna be coming soon. These roads are getting worse. There are more traffic on these roads. And Chapter 90 is not keeping up with the amount of increase between asphalt labor costs. So that's something that the FinCom, this committee, as well as the selectmen, we need to really start focusing on. I know the school is a big budget item, but so is the infrastructure of the roadway systems. And if we keep deferring that, we're gonna have a problem down the road where, we're talking about $1 million for 4 trucks. 2 or 3 years down the road, somebody's gonna be asking for $5 or $10 million for roads. Never mind a police station. So the more we defer, the more we're kicking it all down the road to the day where it all comes to haunt us at one time.
And just, I guess, using Station 2 as an example, and I don't know this, so I'm gonna ask. I would bet that the scope of the work at Station 2 from the request last year to the request this year is pretty consistent.
Yeah, it's just an overlay.
It
It's
hasn't
not-
gotten worse.
So what I'm trying to say
I mean,
is
maybe some more crackling.
the cost increase is solely material. It's not the scope of the
Right.
the scope of the project hasn't increased.
Right, it stays
It's
the same.
it's the materials
Yeah.
that we're looking to fund to
We
make
also
that.
have upcoming paving at Station 1.
Mhm.
With the
That-
helicopter launch pad and all that.
Well, Station 1, the helicopter pad is on hold until such time,
They know what they're gonna do with the police station.
yeah, whether we get the police station up there or not.
And I would think all those things would be addressed at one time.
Right.
Within that project.
But that's gonna be another multi-million-dollar project if we go that multi.
Well, a couple of years ago, I was going through the capital plan reports that were on the website from years ago. And somewhere between 2008, 2012, when there were all these issues with the housing market, we know that was impacting property tax revenues, and everything else. The capital planning committee at the time said that they weren't, and the report says, this year we've decided to move nothing. And I have to wonder what kind of maybe you remember, what, was that a nightmare in terms of, or at least a difficulty in the coming years trying to catch up with whatever they didn't move? I mean, they probably would have had, what, 500,000 at most in that year. unless it was
That
something big.
usually, $500,000 was the number we had years ago for capital.
So that would seem like it's a worse problem to have than what we're dealing with now. Sometimes I feel a little stressed as we go through this, but on the other hand, this isn't that big of a problem because it's not that we can't afford to solve the problem. It's just we have to decide how we're gonna pay for it.
Right.
And assuming everyone's on the same page, we're gonna replace 4 trucks. And with that, Mr. Breelman, do you have any thoughts or concerns? We haven't heard from you yet. I want to make sure you're not being ignored.
Just fumbling around with my technology. No thoughts or concerns separate than what everybody else has already brought up.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Paul, if I'm remembering right, your priority goes in descending order of price, right? The 330,000 are the 2 most important to you, and then
The 3 big trucks are most important. The 1 ton, because the 1 ton is only 12 years old right now. And that's expected, like I said, to replace sometime maybe in the summer of 25 or spring of 26. So we're still gonna get 3 or 4 more years on it. The bigger trucks, because of the age of those trucks, are the high priority. Now, I'll be honest, this proposal in front of the capital planning committee is to increase from a 6-wheeler to 10-wheelers. Because as of 2015, we knew that we needed larger equipment. I don't want to say, hey, let's go back to the regular 6-wheel price because that could put us behind the 8 ball. Now, we've been very fortunate for the last 2 or 3 years that the amount of rain, snowfall has been minimal. But are we going to be foolish and say it's never going to happen again?
I'm not interested in betting against the weather. Look,
Neither do I.
I appreciate what Keith has had to say about where we are in the decision-making process. Given that where I sit between the 2 committees, I am a little reluctant, and if I am alone in that, that is what it is. I'm a little reluctant to go cash for all 4. I'm persuaded enough that we're going to cause ourselves significantly more problems by deferring one of them. My preference, I think, would be to lease the $180,000.
So could we say then that you're for bolt solution, but you want to exercise a little bit of caution? You're gonna look for pretty. So that 180, let's just say that he's representing what we're gonna encounter with finance committee.
Which I really, given the nature of I really do not want to claim to speak for any kind of official, other than to say that I sit through those meetings.
So hypothetically, we just say we have two options. We say we do all four as cash and we'll see what they come back with and we change our mind. We feel like we need to, or we just go to town meeting where we want to go. Or we take that truck, which would, especially on a short lease, if it makes sense, would accrue the least amount of interest. Because it's the cheapest truck, right?
Carol just has.
Oh, sorry, Carol?
Yes, hi. I just want to speak on this a little bit because we don't know the status of our free cash in future years, plain and simple.
Mhm.
We have a very healthy free cash balance now. Yes, it's a big ask, $2.2 million is not something like, that I take lightly. But in looking at our alternatives as far as leasing one or two vehicles, whatever, the capital stabilization fund cannot support any more leases right now without free cash being transferred into it. More free cash than the $100,000 that it gets every year. So no matter what, you're going to be using free cash, and we have it this year.
If we deferred the first payment to when the truck was received, would that change things?
It all depends on the lease. Some of the lease partners that we deal with require a deposit before we
again,
even
so-
get the vehicle.
And maybe just to piggyback on what Carol had to say, can we say to the leasing company, we're gonna give you a commitment that we're gonna lease this truck when it comes in a year and a half, 2 years from now, and not make a payment on it for the year and a half, 2 years? We can. But they're financing that for us, so we're paying that carrying costs. It's not being absorbed by the manufacturer. So, I tried to run some scenarios for you. I agree with Carol, on the fact that, the capital stabilization account is,
Well, can I put it this way and
Oh,
say that, let's just say your personal income is one that fluctuates. You're a salesperson and you do very well in a good economy. You have the money to purchase a very nice car. If you decide to lease or finance that car,
Mhm.
you don't know what your income is going to be when you're somewhere in the middle of those annual payments. And you have a $500, $600 a month payment on a nice car. Now you can't make it. But you could have bought it in cash when you needed the car. If what Carol's saying is we can't predict what we'll have in free cash or what would be allowable to transfer to capital stabilization to pay the leases, that's a whole different problem.
Right.
but again, the problem with, the issue with free cash is, we don't know what it's gonna be next year or years down the road. We have, like I said, and I hate to repeat myself, but we're in a position financially right now to not have to finance vehicles, defer vehicles, or increase the amount of money we're having to put into this capital stabilization account. Frankly, if we get these 4 vehicles and we pay them in cash based on what we know here tonight, I understand it's like ripping the Band-Aid off and moving forward, but that's really what it is, and it puts the community, I think, in its capital needs for vehicles in a much stronger position than it's in right now. And would be, and if you deferred, one or more of the vehicles.
I'd like to say one more thing if I could.
Sure.
The reason why I said we don't know what free cash is going to be in future years is because we have a water moratorium. We're getting less building permits. We're getting a lot less revenue. So that seriously will impact our free cash
Mhm.
in future years.
Mhm.
So to take care of the town's needs now while we can, and while we're comfortable in still leaving $1 million in free cash, like Keith had said, to rip the Band-Aid off, it's a good analogy.
Only hurts for a second.
Exactly.
And if we pay cash, this money sits in the town's bank account until such day I get possession of the truck.
Precisely.
There's no payments when we order.
Still committed.
It's committed, but it's still collecting
But
interest in
it's
our
collecting
savings.
interest, but
Right.
I think
But to Carol's point, you know, by not leasing the vehicle, if there's an impact on free cash, we don't have a commitment that we have to now fund in future years when that potential impact may occur. I understand the uneasiness everybody has. I kind of feel the same way, but
I feel part of the issue is that when you're dipping into free cash, we're going into money that other boards and committees and so in town meeting ultimately has control over or stake in.
Sure.
Are we spending too much time discussing the financing options? Should we have a joint meeting with the other two boards?
not
Is
yet.
that too much chaos or?
I think so. Here's my 2 cents.
Yep.
My 2 cents is if we can have the capital planning committee decide what in a perfect world, what their recommendations would be. We know we have a town budget that is being reviewed by the finance committee and they're nearly done with the town side. I don't think any major decisions are gonna be made on the town or the school side until we actually have a complete budget that includes the schools. And when we get to that point, there may be a really good reason to have these 3 boards get together and have a conversation to figure out, here's where we are, here's where we think we want to be. What can we do to have the least amount of impact on us, both current year and long term, to get to where we got from where we are to where we need to be. Right now, that meeting, I would suggest to you is still probably 2 or 3 weeks away.
And we should vote our recommendation and just be willing to come to the table
Yep.
to negotiate.
That'd be my suggestion.
Negotiate our position if we have.
Yep.
Otherwise, if we don't like, we just go to town meeting.
Yep. Yep.
Which I'm hoping doesn't happen. but-
And I don't think it's a wise choice to make. I mean, I think if we can, if the consensus can't be found, if we end up having a joint meeting, then that's fine. At least we gave it a shot. But I think that the school committees, the Board of Selectmen has submitted a budget to the FinCom. The FinCom has to weigh in and we have to plug all those numbers together and see where those shake out. And if we need to go back and take another bite at the apple, we do that.
I think your concern is the free cash. Mine, your gut instinct, and mine is carrying too many leases. That always bothers me because it's 2 types of flexibility we lose. One, when you commit, there's so many, as we were hearing, there's not enough room for other leases. And 2, the stuff you wouldn't lease, you can't do because you committed to at least 3 or 4 years ago. And you never know what's going to come down the road. So we don't have a crystal ball here.
We don't. And I guess, and I am very hesitant to push back in the way that I am, but I worry about kind of 2 things at this point in the discussion. I still am concerned about where that free cash balance started, given its percentage of the overall budget.
Where what? I'm sorry.
Where we started with free cash, that we ended up at $3.5 million at one point.
Well, again, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, we carried over quite a bit to start the year with our free cash number, right? So that's a piece of it. And again, Carol knows this better than I, but we had I think a pretty successful year revenue wise, where we brought in a lot more money than we estimated, and we estimate on a conservative basis to be safe. There were also some liabilities, I think, Carol, that dropped as well, which had an impact on free cash.
Right, not so much liabilities, but our expenditures, I think we turned back on 1.5 million in appropriations. So between the 2 and a lot of other calculations, we are at 3.49, I think it was our starting free cash balance, and we spent 300,000 at the fall town meeting.
Yeah, I guess my second piece is I understand the conversation about this with free cash. Again, maybe because I'm also sitting in all these FinCom meetings, it's hard for me to separate out the overall impact to the total budget. If there is a concern about leases, which again, I share, then at this point, I'm probably a no on the whole. And again, I'm happy to be in the minority on that. I understand that there are a lot of factors here.
Are you saying the force truck is 180?
185, yeah. I'm a little, again, I am a little, rightly or wrongly, I am a little spooked by what we are looking at and some of the uncertainty, and
I would say that, I'm sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
God, no,
If we were all on the same page with the vote, anyone who's in the majority, I think, could ask for a reconsideration.
Mhm.
And as long as I can get a meeting posted in 48 hours, I'll do it. So if we're all on the same page, anyone can come to me and say, I think you need an agenda posted, I want to reconsider, I'll put it up. If it's the pushback from, the finance committee, maybe makes a point that we're not thinking about, again, we can come to an agreement. I'll put another meeting or we'll have a joint meeting. If we all wanted to get on the same page and say, hey, let's do 3 trucks and cash and all one for a year. We're all on the same page. Any of us can ask for reconsideration if we're 2 weeks down the road and say, hey, you know what? That concern's past us. Let's just add the 4th truck. But if we're divided, we can't 2-2, we can't do anything.
So,
And if we're 3-1 and the one person who's a 1 wants a reconsideration, I think the rules don't allow somebody in the dissenting. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That is correct. So that's why I'm thinking to me, it's more equally, let's just say, open-minded if we are on the same page, because any one of us could then say, hey, wait a second. And you know me, I'll drop everything and post a meeting to accommodate something that needs to be done.
so again, this is your meeting, not mine. I'm just here to help. But my suggestion, I think everybody kind of has a sense of where they want to be. My suggestion might be if somebody make a motion, you can deliberate about that motion. And there might be a vote, there might be an amendment, who knows? But at this point, you're not really, you're discussing options, but there's nothing really on the floor formally to make a decision.
No, usually what we do is we go through them one by one. And then if there's a discussion on the particular item, it's to be had at that time, then we go and move on. This is kind of a 4-item package deal.
Understood?
Even if they're separate items, you got to consider them in whole, and we're considering those versus, we haven't really talked about the other items there, but we've been looking at them versus the leases. I've been thinking about the other capital requests that are on the 5-year plan. And in part, doing that has made me lean a little bit more towards the cash option. But then, I watch the finance committee meetings. I care about the financial position of the town, but I am looking through a capital planning lens a lot of the time, and I understand what Mike is saying. I have a reaction to spending money of any kind. I also, want the roads in good shape. And I think that the $180,000 truck, if it came to it, is the one that, we're probably it's not going to be, it's not going to kill the operations in that. Significantly slow it down. Well, I'll tell you what. We're at this kind of point. Keith's probably detected he's been a lot more of these meetings than I have.
You watch more than I've ever been to.
I don't think I watched one you've been to.
All right.
I watched the ones you're in.
Well, I know you do that.
Those are just the public ones.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the other ones. Well, okay, so let's just have a look at the work we have tonight. We have, let's see, looks like 4 enterprise fund projects we need to vote that are not part of a warrant article. A possible reconsideration if we wanted to on the tennis court rehab project, although we could also tackle something like that when we meet on our minutes. That's not an actual warrant that we have to build, just to vote we have to hand in. And then we have the 6 leases, prior leases, and the 6 items. 6 items in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
The trucks, yeah. Do you want to start making motions?
Sure.
You're a good motion maker, and Wayne's a good seconder, and
Cool.
Chris is a good clerk, and he needs to be taking the notes, so.
Just so I understand, since I'm doing this for the first time, we're doing this project by project. Recommend the finance committee, move the finance
Recommend.
committee recommend.
And then you usually, you name the project and the amount, and, we got the project names, I think, just about as simple as they can be. So then we're not, so that it's, we don't want to get confused with things like truck numbers and,
Yeah,
that kind of.
well, all right, here we go. I move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on project number one, $60,000 for replacement of the townwide phone system.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say yes. Roll call vote.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Keith, aye.
Chris, I.
Okay. You can, if you're making the motion, if you don't want to do them in order, just want to stay within that spreadsheet there.
All right, I will move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on project number two, vehicle replacement in the amount of $267,510.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Keith, aye.
Chris, I.
Sorry for the delay. I'm just going to write down all the stuff in case you need it for your notes.
I move favorable action. The capital plan committee recommend favorable action on project number three, vehicle replacement in the amount of $331,773.
Second.
All those in favor, Keith, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
I move the capital plan. I'll get up at the end. I move the
Did we get a vote from Heath?
Sorry, I thought I said Keith, aye.
Okay, just missed it.
All right, ditto. Project four.
Yeah, I move capital plan committee recommend favorable action on project number four, a second vehicle replacement in the amount of $331,773.
Second.
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
Motion passes unanimously.
There is a point of order on project number five.
You may.
Can reconsideration be requested by someone who abstains?
I think you have to be in the majority.
I think you do too. I don't know.
We get, why don't you skip project five?
Yep.
Why don't we finish
Oh,
4, 5, and 6?
well.
Sorry,
now
the
going
numbers are wrong.
6, 7, and 8.
Oh, sorry. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
I recommend favorable action on the real project five. No. All right.
Don't use the project numbers anymore. We see the description and the costs.
All right, I move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on a project to be numbered later, consisting of $50,000 for engineering for various traffic safety improvements.
Second.
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
Unanimous. Merry Christmas, Paul.
Thank you.
I move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on an unnumbered project, $158,056 to replace patrol SUVs.
Second.
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
I move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on an unnumbered project, $100,000 to replace the exterior steel doors at the Kingston Intermediate School. I
Second.
guess we did.
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
I've opened.
Well, that one is, yeah, I don't know. I'll just copy it over from that.
Yeah.
Now, do you want to do, do we want to go through the leases and the enterprise fund projects and come back to the truck? Or are you, Michael, are you feeling like you want to talk about the $180,000?
Let's get the motions done and come back to us if that works.
All right,
All right, I recommend the capital planning committee, I move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action for $189,917 for the second year of a 5-year lease to remount and refurbish ambulances 1 and 2.
second, Beach Wing. We had to fight for that one.
That's all right. Keep that in mind.
All right, all those in
Making
favor,
more work for
Heath,
me.
aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
All right,
Move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action for $205,910 for the fourth year of a 7-year lease for the acquisition of a ladder truck.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
You are a motion machine. Keep going, buddy.
Move capital planning committee, recommend favorable action on $149,994 for the third year of a 5-year lease for the acquisition of engine 1.
Second,
Okay, all those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
If we could, when we get around to it, get rid of the 4 extra prepositions in that one, that'd probably be easier to read.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I move that the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on $149,672 to fund the first year of a 6-year lease for the acquisition of a brush truck.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
Move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on $18,995 to fund the 6th year of a 7-year lease for the acquisition of a backhoe.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
Move the finance committee recommend, nope, capital planning committee was doing so well. Move the capital planning committee recommend favorable action on $33,027 to fund the first year of a 5-year lease for the acquisition of a 1-ton dump truck.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
All right, so except for the committee name, you were pretty precise. Really
They start
good.
making capital plan motions at FinCom, we'll know there's really a problem.
All right, I'll take a turn. Okay, I move that the capital planning committee move favorable action on well cleaning pump replacement for the water department to the cost of $75,000.
Second,
All's in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
I move the capital planning committee move favorable action on tank paint for the water department for $300,000.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
I move for the capital planning committee to move favorable action on water department Elm Street building repairs to the cost of $40,000.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
I move for the capital planning committee favorable action for the wastewater department to replace and repair isolation valves system-wide at the cost of $100,000.
Second,
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
Okay, did you, for those 4, did you do the first 3 seconds? I think you did. Wayne did the last
Yes.
one. I messed up one's writing.
That's what
Okay.
it sounded like to me.
All right, we're moving right along. All right, back to $180,000 problem. What do you think, Michael?
Although I'm reluctant, I'm given the options that we have for reconsideration. I'm fine with the understanding that this is essentially a draft vote with be subject to potentially serious revision if necessary, given what information.
If we were to lease that truck, the additional charge would be 20 grand over 4 years or 5 years.
No.
Let's do the diesel.
So if we leased it this year, we'd avoid the emissions,
Right?
right? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I could get it for you. It'd be, I don't even want to guess. 180,000, probably over 4 or 5 years. Well, they just approved a $33,000 lease payment for a 5-year lease payment for a 1-ton.
So
So
33
you're
times
probably
5,
looking at another, yeah.
150,
It's just like,
Five.
It depends on
165.
how many years you set the lease term.
Well, see, and, you know, the interest rates have gone up too, so.
But I mean, if you did a shorter one, assuming you
Oh, yeah,
could-
yeah.
what Carol and everybody else are saying,
Grand.
if we can fit it in, then, you know, it's,
That number's not with the finance percentage, that's just 180 divided by 5. So you're gonna add 6% to that, so you're looking at another. This is where Carol comes into play. Carol, what's 6% of $36,000?
So I had, I had,
So 38.
in my analysis of capital stabilization, I funded it over 3 years at $67,340 annually for 3 years. So that is 180 and 21, $201,000. So you're looking at $21,000 in interest costs based on my use of the interest rate that I
and
use.
now if we didn't lease it, if we simply purchased it next year, like we're definitely gonna,
Mhm.
that's the truck for next year's
Yep.
capital plan.
Mhm.
And it's the inflation. I know you'd rather get the order in soon, but I'm just thinking if we have to revisit options, would
Mhm.
delaying the purchasing of it be better than paying the interest on the?
No.
No.
I don't think so. And the reason I said it is it's say $21,000 for a 3-year lease based on the scenario I laid out there. I guess I shouldn't say no so quickly. I don't know what the emission cost is gonna be. And I don't know what the inflation number is gonna be for a for a 2026 vehicle. So I don't know that, but one of the things that we're working with our vendor on is having him provide us what he thinks, you know, a truck a year from now is gonna cost. And we can have, you know, and I'll have that shortly, but
So I make sure I understand what, so you think that within reason, we're looking at leasing versus deferral for a year, both incurs about $20,000 future cost in ballpark-ish.
so, and again, I'm not, I just, I don't wanna be the alarmist, right? Worst case scenario is it's gonna cost us 20 grand for the emission upgrade in the one ton. We've been given a range of 5 to 20,000. So I don't wanna sit here and tell you it's gonna be 20 if it ends up being 7. That being the case, I also don't know what the inflation number is gonna be of those trucks, but I bet those trucks have gone up $3,000 or $4,000 a year, easy.
More at least.
So, you know, even let's just say the emissions are $5,000 to $7,000. You're probably gonna,
10
you're probably gonna say
minimum.
10 minimum on just on inflation on the cost of the truck.
Well, right here, the one that we ordered, the total cost of that price was $161,500. Right? So the
Now we're
next,
180.
so the one is now 180, so that's an additional 19
18.5.
in a year.
So it's like putting two of these diesel complaints.
You have to wait till July 1st to put the order in, or you put the order after pass the time.
I can give them a verbal once town meeting votes on it, but they don't get actual until the Attorney General clears everything that was going on town meeting. That's usually the last week in June, first week of July.
That's when you can actually get the bid.
Because-
We hold a spot for you in the.
Right now, for the big trucks, they're holding the spot for 3 of the trucks. And he's holding them on. If for some reason we have to postpone the one ton, we just postpone it. That's, like I said, out of the 4 trucks that I'm looking for, if one had to be, because of financials, pushed off another year, we could probably get by with that. But I need to have some assurances that when we're sitting at the table next year, we won't defer that one for another year. See what I'm saying? And that's where we got to where we are today, because as I said, previous versions kept kicking these down the road. So if we have to kick one down the road, like I said, that's not a huge hurdle to overcome. If we want to, if you want to give me the one ton and take one of the big ones, that's going to be a service level service
The
problem.
costs on that are higher because.
Right.
You're inflating a higher price. you're putting in a bigger engine potentially
Right,
with the diesel compliance, and it's a higher amount, if we have a lease, it's a higher amount, therefore it's a higher interest. Not this higher interest rate, it's the higher interest payment.
correct.
Yeah, I mean, the long term, to keep the cash thing makes more sense. It's just-
And 180,000, not gonna bankrupt the town.
No, sir.
Right. But I also aware of the other needs that you guys talked about this evening, right? I don't want, I am trying to be fair, because I don't want the residents out there thinking that, you know, the highway guy's making a big grab here.
They're gonna be picketing in front of your house.
That's okay. Paint the
All
truck red.
three of them will walk.
Tell them it's fire.
The fire chief would love that also, because it increases.
It'll be nice if you finish painting your trucks.
And I forgot to inform this committee that as of Monday.
The price of the gray paint's cheaper than the price of the green.
See what you started?
I have.
As of Monday morning at 10:30, we are now in possession of a 2024 114 SD tractor with a plow. Hoping to get the paperwork run to the insurance company so we can get it registered by next week, but we are now in possession of both new trucks that we ordered 2 years ago.
Is that Battleship Gray also?
It is.
It's called primer gray.
He's a Navy man, as he
I know.
reminded us. All right. I move the capital planning committee move favorable action on $180,000 vehicle replacement for streets, roads and parks. Anybody like to second that? Second if it's further discussion.
Second for discussion.
I'm just trying to move it along. We know we've got to do something. We have to pull the trigger. Like I said, I just want to solve the problem. If this is the most fiscally responsible thing to do, move it then. We have to change a little bit to get over some hurdles. As long as we're still in a better position than waiting. That's what got us in this problem. We were waiting. And we started catching up to 2 vehicles per year, and that did not seem to be enough.
Keith, I hear you. I think that this does everything that it said it would do. And concerned about the number of other problems that we have to solve and the uncertainty that regards them.
What do you think, Wayne?
Well, I'll certainly support Michael's request for reconsideration if the next meeting he feels that something we should pursue.
I mean,
I also think we need to pull the trigger on this, and $180,000 isn't gonna.
no, I think, you know, we will have to have a meeting soon just to do our minutes, because I'd like those to be on the website, especially from all our voting. Before we go to town meeting, in case any member of the public wants to go and review, I think we owe it to them. Like I said, it could happen at the next meeting, or I'll call a meeting to reconsider if it's asked. I may want to do it after, you know, going before finance committee, getting 2 chairs from that, who knows? But I don't want it to happen at town meeting.
Not that my vote on this will be determined on the other committee's votes. They haven't voted, they haven't seen this at all yet. They haven't
No,
made a
sir.
decision.
Nope. They're just hearing rumors.
I think everybody's so busy with their own stuff, they aren't
Yeah.
really worried about stuff right now, from everybody else.
So I bumped into Carl in the hallway. What's this about more trucks? I said, oh, you heard.
I would venture to say from the tone of the conversations about the rate of budget growth that have occurred at virtually every finance committee meeting that I've been able to attend, I suspect that this is going to cause heartburn at a minimum and more than likely. Look, I certainly don't want to speak for anybody else. There's a couple folks on that committee who are way more experienced than I am. I have a very hard time seeing this getting to 7 out of the committee.
I'll also say that last year, some of them, 2 or 3 maybe, voted against the remounts of the ambulances. And then at town meeting, nobody brought it up and the room just moved it. the budget increases bother me, but when you're replacing something that you have a demonstrated need for, it's a durable asset that lasts a long time. I have to wonder if there are cuts to be made, should they be made in, other areas? I'm not gonna go into what should be, it's not the scope of this committee, but we all know what we might think should be cut. It's, I don't think it should be, this level of need for the town. Most of our transportation rides on roads.
All right, with the caveat that I am casting this vote, as you put it quite well, through a capital plant lens, I'm certainly happy to move to a vote.
Yeah, and then, like I said, we can, at some point, if we have to reconsider it, we will. And that reconsideration might just be that, oh, we got some flack over it, but if we think this is important and I am concerned, my concern is always the long run of financing, anything financial, because if we kick it down the road, that future budget's growing. That's really what bothers me, is that the costs down the road are because of the inflation, the diesel engines.
Yep.
We have a lack of flexibility in the future. We may not have the kind of free cash to do something like this with, we've got a lot of leases that we're carrying.
Look, I mean, for all my concerns, I think, and I am more than happy to make the case to folks on FinCom, that there are some pretty unique aspects to this.
Perfect storm.
I don't
Okay.
have anything further, so.
Anybody have anything else? Chris?
Carol?
Will oh, you have to vote. I don't have anything on this. I just had a
Okay.
question on some of the other projects that don't require town funding.
Enterprise funds?
No, the like community preservation projects, and will you be voting on those?
Well, we did vote on one, we voted on two that were qualified as capital, capital assets. We gave our advisory votes on those. Those were the irrigation wells for the Opachinsky Field Complex and the Reed Tennis Court rehabilitation. We may be reconsidering that one if the board wants it, the committee.
Okay.
All right, well, let's just get the vote on this. Chris?
Nothing really different than what's already been discussed. I'll just say that with all the uncertainty, it seems to me that interest rates are a function of uncertainty. So the more uncertainty, the more appealing purchasing with cash seems to me.
Okay. All right, well, all those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, aye.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes that portion. Some of it went by as quick as any of them have, not quicker. And then, thanks to you. Attention.
I will be behind you guys when we go see the FinCom, when we go see the South.
Out of range.
You know what? When it comes to my 4 trucks, I'll be the front one in line on this one if you want to. It's, like we talked about 2 meetings ago, is, you guys know more, especially with FinCom. We have the cash. I would say let's not incur any of these other finance charges, because down the road, as we know, the vacuum truck is 6+. That's of today's
Right, that
dollars.
was 2 years ago, that went on the capital plan. This is
Right.
not all the other concerns, and half of them. That was the answer.
And
Now it's 660,
yeah, plus.
and it probably went up yesterday.
So knowing that going forward, knowing that the trackless is going to be replaced going forward, those are 2 big concerns just in my department. Once again, not addressing the asphalt. And I also know, talking with the fire chief, that he's got some stuff coming forward too later. So we're, instead of, kicking it down, we're addressing the issue with today. Now, I have no problem getting up at town meeting and trying to educate whoever needs to educate to get these. I'll put that on my shoulders if we need to. But I'm hoping that between this committee, the selectmen, and the finance committee, if it's one big group effort, usually there's no pushing at town meeting. But there have been times in the past, and here it's there, that I've had to get up and speak to try to get the votes to get some of this. And I always say the same thing. I wish these trucks were a lot cheaper, but they're not. They were at a time, but that time is past.
The one-way ratchet.
All right, Carol, your question about the CPC funded items?
Well, not just the CPC. I was not present at any of your prior capital planning committee meetings, but like the Maple Street culvert replacement, the wetland restoration of Blackwater Memorial Forest, they're all funded by grants.
We did not vote on them. We just listened to them as they are capital projects.
Yep.
So we're just kind of doing a passive review, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Our votes don't impact the grant necessarily. However, you know, if a grant didn't come through and somebody did apply for capital funding, we would have had, I guess, an earlier view of what's happening. It's also, I think, just good for us to understand the infrastructure stuff going on around town.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. With that said, what's the time? 7:35. Does anybody want to, I don't know if you have to make a motion to reconsider. Does anyone want to reconsider the tennis courts? Before we voted against them because we were concerned that if we were in favor, that the community preservation fund could potentially just follow through with the tennis courts and not fund the well replacement, which would have been a problem. It would have either come out of our end or wouldn't have gotten done. So we said the priority is the wells. So we voted against the tennis courts. I've had some back and forth in my mind on the tennis courts, but I think I'm not certain that they need to move this year, but if anybody wants to reconsider, I thought based on the discussion we had at the time, it was worth putting it out there. If you guys wanted to change our vote. I know Wayne, you said, you know, you like the project.
I like the project, even if we just did a repair, and the idea was that it would be the silver practice.
I don't, I'm sorry.
My concern was if it's drainage, I'd like to see a third party engineer come in and confirm. The one that's kind of in the middle that zigzags through a little bit. We'd just be, since the rec director said that a drainage system is not part of the plan for rebuild. My concern is at some point.
You're gonna have to.
So I don't mind delaying a year. I actually thought I kind of changed my mind. Not only is it a nice spot to play tennis if you're a tennis player, I went there and thought, let's just go there with my wife, bring out the badminton rackets and just, you know, just to stay fit, go volley back and forth. So I have my kids down the playground. Once they're old enough to be down there on their own,
Right.
as they're still in eyesight. My concern is with Grays Beach is that they want to rehab that from our funds next year for $50,000. Grays Beach usage could be shifted to the Reed, and that has the capacity to do everything it was doing plus the Grays Beach. Which meant if they ever wanted to put more parking spots or create a turnaround on that lot, so on a busy time, when you go in, realize there's no parking spots and have to back up from that dead end, and you've got new cars coming in behind you, you're stuck. I'd hate to spend a lot of money on a tennis court down there before they resolve the parking issues. So that kind of leads me a little bit in favor of this, but the crack and not being, it being on a leveled out spot of a hill, I can see drainage as being cause for the crack. That kind of, it looks like it's a 4 to 6 inch patch going through there. Paul, do you have any input on that kind of asphalt? I know it's tennis courts.
I haven't looked at them yet. Another thing we have to take into consideration is the age of those tennis courts.
They're about 25 at least.
I was, my tennis lessons when I was a kid were on those courts. And I'm not a kid
That was
anymore.
only a few years ago, Paul.
Yeah, you're right. So I watched the meeting when you guys were discussing this, and first question is over time, things settle? Is it because the tennis courts have 50 years?
It doesn't look unleveled. It looks like it's pulling apart.
I can take a ride down there either tomorrow or Friday. and
So maybe if we want, we can hold this reconsideration until next week we get some feedback from you, because it's a 4 to 6 inch crack. They put a mesh in there with a seal patch of some kind. I read that the mesh, they thought at the time, you may have heard this in that meeting, that it was the best thing since sliced bread in fixing these things. Now, once that becomes exposed, all it takes is some teenage vandal something, they can rip the whole thing all the way down.
Really?
But that crack of that size tells me that everything else by comparison is a hairline crack. It's ½ inch to 1 inch, and it's occurring in 2 types of locations. Between the nets, where the net posts have anchors, I learned this online, is a cable, it's just tension,
Yep.
the crack mirrors on the asphalt to the cable. We have them also on the white lines of the court. Mr. Breelman, who demonstrated his genius, said, maybe the sun's reflecting off that and the surrounding surfaces are heating up and is causing a movement as it settles, you know, maybe at night when the temperature cools down and the heat comes out of that could be, and then Michael looked it up on his
I
computer.
saw that, yes.
Yeah.
What I can do is I can check and then I can check with our asphalt company vendor and see if he has any ideas.
I mean, it's just, for me, I'd rather just say if it's a drainage issue, I'd rather see it. Maybe the people who are doing this have already figured out, they're not gonna put pipes underneath, they're gonna do something around the edge, I don't know. Maybe they look at it, so that's no way, is that the issue, but if that's something that's cropped up in the past several years, I'd hate to see it happen.
Now, I know when we crack fill the roads, so there's a fiber in the emulsion already. It's not a tape, it's a fiber itself. And that's, when that gets into the cracks, that's supposed to bind so it doesn't crack any further. So maybe we can use that technology on tennis courts, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there's other issues beyond just the crack, it's just whether that would occur on the new surface.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure it's not a trip and fall hazard. Plus, I know they play field hockey. I mean, yeah.
I think she said they were gonna, it was
They have
part of the
nets.
project was gonna be to make it a multi-purpose court, so you could have street hockey, pickleball, tennis.
If it's okay with, if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to have, if you're gonna discuss it at your next meeting, or when you discuss it, I can certainly ask, the recreation director to be here as well and, try to answer any questions anybody
Because
has.
I would like to give a better vote than 0-4-0.
Sure, no, I'm happy to have
If
her,
that-
I'm sure she'd be happy to come in and have a conversation.
I'm leaning on, it's a nice asset, but I'm not sure the project is worth the yes vote right now. And I'd like to,
Okay, yeah, we'll do that.
what do you think?
I think waiting.
So that's all our votes. I'm gonna table the meeting minutes, the next meeting. To make it a lot easier for us. Future meetings, I think I mentioned before, I think we probably want to have an agenda item to maybe discuss some of the projects that are coming up in upcoming years. I'll take a look at it. Keith, maybe you can take a look at it, but there's a lot of stuff that looks like it's was it fiscal year 27, 28 between fire and highway, and with all this leasing and all these things, does it make sense to move something to 2026 or, I mean, fiscal year 26 or out to fiscal year 29? Which ones are impacted by the diesel issues? Of course, inflation impacts them all. But and just thinking about that parking lot repave, if that thing's going up 50% every 1 to 2 years, at some point it has to slow, but it
No, I
was
understand.
50,000 a few years ago, 75 now. We can patch it, but at some point it's gonna get jackhammered,
So, yeah, and frankly, don't spend a ton.
however they demolish it.
It'll never be jackhammered. We're gonna overlay that parking lot. The other issue is this parking lot. Now, we crack filled this parking lot and did a slurry cover on just the parking lot side, but as you know, coming in here needs to be ground and repaved. The parking lot is never gonna be ground up. We might have to grind where his doors are. Because outside his doors of Station 2, there's a concrete apron. Right, so if we put an 1.5 inch overlay over that parking lot, it would come over that apron. So we'd have to grind an 1.5 inch away from the front of that apron. But the rest of the parking lot, because of being where that is, and the slopes that are on there, all that parking lot drains to the front section, drains to Smith's Lane. So, once again, that was built in 85, and I don't think it was ever be finished. I know it wasn't even finished.
There's some sections that look like they've either faded in rates or there was a line in extension or something. I've only driven up there recently once just to see there's like potholes and cracks at the entrance and exit.
Yep.
One's very cracked, the other one has a deep pothole.
Deep pothole. What happens is, and what's happening at Station 1 is when they come off that concrete apron, it's outside the door, especially with the big trucks. The weight, especially in the summertime, it gets hot, so it compresses the asphalt right at the edge of that apron. To fix that, you gotta dig down probably 10 inches, put dense grade back there, and then build that all back up again.
Right, so it's flush with the
Flush with the
bottom of the
slope, yeah.
taper of the slope.
And the same with this parking lot, because of the handicap accessibility, I can't overlay this parking lot or I'll mess up the ADA requirements. So in front here, I've got to have to take an 1.5 inches off pretty much the whole length of the first parking lot. Cars to get that down so we can repave that, so it's handicap accessible. And then the rest of the parking lot we can overlay. But that's, it's not just the fire station. He's the one that's bringing it forward, but we have parking lots at the library, the Reed, Station 1, the police station. the town hall. I mean, these all parking lots eventually don't even fall under the road system. So I don't know if we wanna, if, you know, if you want me to come up with some, if we're gonna do Mark's parking lots at Station 1 and 2, 1 year, do we do, you know, town hall? My parking lot out back is.
Was that the intention originally was for your department to do it? And we were gonna, and then these are material costs plus any overtime labor, or are these gonna be contracted out and you were gonna supervise?
All our paving is done contracted. My guys don't pave. So what Mark asked me to do is, okay, how much is it gonna cost to have that guy come in and pave this? So I gave him that price probably 2 years ago, 3 years. And I told him if we can come up with some money, we can use that to pay that parking lot as well as the entrance for this one for now.
Mhm.
But that's another thing that, you know, the Reed parking lot, we tied that up to the source system back in 2010. That parking lot hasn't been touched at all, so eventually that one's gonna have to be overlaid, but the problem with that one is, because of the slope.
I was gonna say, can you do the town a favor and level it?
There was talk about that about 15 years ago, about trying to make it better there, but these are all concerns and challenges going forward that we're gonna have to address sometime.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start looking forward, and that's part of what we're doing with this trust discussion,
Right.
about where we've got this stuff piling up. And I'd rather bite a bullet now than bite a bullet every year, you know, with these
Mhm.
things, and then just watch the costs expand.
Mhm.
Because the school parking lots are gonna be another one, that's under the school budget, it's not under the highway stuff. And if you go down by the
Yeah.
elementary school,
Let me ask you something. Is there a cost difference depending on which, whether it's the town and the school paying for and overseeing it? No. They would use the same contract?
we have a contractor who takes care of all the pavement needs in the town.
Okay,
So if the time comes to pave the parking lot in the schools, but there's another issue there too, is they have ADA ramps going on their sidewalks. So we have to grind some down there so we don't increase that issue. And then, like I said, that parking lot, even when they did the schools over back in the early 2000s, they never, any did in the parking lots. The element, I mean, the intermediate school parking was showing its age, especially on the side there, between the two schools.
Yeah, that one's rough.
And that school was built in '04, so, 20 years.
all right, the annual town meeting's been rescheduled to May 11th, still to be held at Kingston Intermediate School. Okay, scheduling, so we do need a meeting for minutes, and presumably we could be talking about the tennis courts again, and potentially reconsidering a truck vote if something happens between now and then. The further we push the meeting out, the more likely if something comes up, we'll catch it at that meeting, and I have to have another meeting following. But the sooner we get it done, the sooner we get our minutes through, there's no question about that. So with that being said, I'm looking at the first, second, third weeks of April. There's 3 days I could not attend. But if there's any time that you guys can't attend, I like to cross them off now. We don't need to make a decision now. We're pretty good at getting them done through email and text, setting a date. You know, you have to go home sometimes and check your schedule again or talk to somebody about moving something, whatever, it's fine, but anything you can or can't do. Michael, I know you don't like Mondays.
The only day that I know off the top of my head that I am not gonna be able to do is April 16th.
And I didn't check, do you have a finance committee meeting? You must on either the 3rd, the 10th, or the 17th, right?
Or the
There's
third.
there's a joint, so there's a FinCom meeting on the 3rd.
And the selectmen's on the 9th.
Yes, sir.
Is there a FinCom on the 17th?
I think we kind of designated it as a maybe.
So you may have booked this room or something, but not posted yet.
I can bring my binder up, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I mean, the 4th or the 11th, Thursday, the 4th, or Thursday, the 11th. I just am a little concerned getting too deep into April.
Okay, I'm not available on the 11th. For me, it would be the 4th or the 10th. Any of those problem for you, Keith?
The 4th is not, the 10th, I can really just double check.
I don't mind if we do this remotely if we have to, but otherwise I can.
The 10th, I don't. I mean, you could go the following week, but
Sorry, you said the 10th you can't come?
10th, I'm fine.
Okay,
You could go to the following week. I just wouldn't wait. I mean, I would maybe suggest the earlier in the week on the week of the 15th.
I'm being very selfish. I'd like to avoid that week only because that's vacation, but
Okay,
yeah,
Um,
it's not the end.
Is that the week or is it 22nd?
No, the school vacation week is marathon Monday's the 15th.
Ah, okay.
why don't we just say we'd like the tenth to be kind of our furthest out date unless we have to go further. So let's say within, from, it's like between the fourth and the tenth. Wayne, do you have any days you can?
The fourth could be an issue for me.
I'll put a question mark after that. I can always follow up to you. Let me know what you think.
For the
Chris?
record, I have no scheduling conflicts that I can see at the moment.
Okay, so it looks like, I had to guess, it would probably be the tenth unless we wanted to do the first or the eighth on Monday. Or the fifth on a Friday.
But I can't do that.
Okay? Oh, nobody wants to do Fridays.
I owe you.
Ironically, I'm gonna be trying to navigate pretty close to that bridge we were talking about earlier. I gotta go to Baltimore that weekend.
So let's just say tentatively the tenth and I'll send out confirmations.
I sent an email to Trish, and we're gonna try to reserve the room, so.
This one or 101, otherwise, we're fine doing remote. But if we have to do some kind of last minute thing, that'll
Yep.
probably be a remote anyway.
Yep.
I think the minutes are easy to do in person. You can pass out the papers and make the edits. It's not usually a very long meeting. As I quickly went through this, 4 steps before.
All thanks to Chris.
All right, any member comments, questions or concerns?
I move the committee adjourn 7:53 PM.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, Heath, aye.
Michael, I.
Wayne, I.
Chris, I.
Thank you, everybody.
Carol.